Have you ever found yourself stuck, trying to decide between planning for the big, distant future and needing to make a move, like, right now? It's a classic problem in strategy, for sure. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful framework that can help you solve it, and we're taking our inspiration from two of the world's greatest strategy games.
So let's get right into it. Do you focus on the grand vision, the big picture that might not pay off for years? Or do you zoom in on that immediate, tangible win that's sitting right in front of you? This is the fundamental tension that pretty much every strategist, whether you're in business or just navigating life, has to deal with. And to figure this out, we're going to look at two incredible laboratories of strategy, chess and Go. Now, chess, that's all about material, about forced moves and these really sharp, localized battles. Go, on the other hand, is completely different. It's about influence, about the flow of the entire board, and making these subtle, long-term trade-offs. So you've got two games, but really, they're two totally different ways of thinking. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll dive into these two strategic mindsets. Then we'll explore what it means to think wide like a Go player and deep like a chess master. After that, we'll combine them into one powerful framework, and of course, show you exactly when and how to apply it. And we'll finish up by thinking about your next move. Okay, so let's start by looking at these not just as games, right? But as two completely distinct mindsets for how you can approach any complex problem you might face. First up, let's talk about the Go mindset. This is all about breadth, about perspective, about seeing the entire landscape all at once. We're going to call this thinking wide. So wide thinking basically means you're taking this holistic kind of panoramic view of everything. You're not getting bogged down by a single piece or one little battle. Instead, you're prioritizing influence over just capturing stuff. You're looking at potential over immediate gains, and you're thinking about the long-term trade-offs across the entire playing field. And this quote just nails it. When you're thinking wide, your goal isn't to win a fight, at least not yet. It's to survey the whole landscape and actively shape the options that are going to be available to you later. You're essentially setting the stage for what's about to come. So what does that actually look like? Well, it means you're cultivating potential, not just cashing in on a quick win. It's about managing the global initiative, making moves that force your opponent to react somewhere, anywhere at all. You're mapping out influence before you start counting up points. You're designing for optionality, and maybe most importantly, you're delaying those big, irreversible decisions for as long as you possibly can. All right, now let's flip the coin and look at the other side. Let's step into the world of chess and see how this leads to thinking deep. Deep thinking is pretty much the opposite of that panoramic view. It's a focused, tactical, almost microscopic approach. This is where you zoom all the way in to actually cash in on the advantages you've been setting up. You're focusing on concrete gains you can lock down in the short and medium term. And just listen to the contrast here. A minute ago, we were shaping options. Now, the goal is to execute the decisive line with concrete calculation. All that ambiguity is gone. This is about finding the single best sequence of moves and then just executing it with total precision. The keywords here are all about that precision. You're securing your advantages through very specific, calculated lines. You're prioritizing material and forced moves. You're constantly calculating, quantifying exchanges and gains. The whole point is to execute these sharp, decisive sequences and to commit your resources only when the math tells you it's absolutely the right time. Okay, so we've got these two really powerful but kind of opposing mindsets. The real magic and the real question is, how do we get them to work together? Well, that's exactly where the wide then deep framework comes in. So the framework itself is a really simple two-step process, but the sequence is absolutely crucial. You have to start wide, like a Go player. Observe the whole field, understand the potential, shape your options. And only then do you switch gears and go deep, like a chess player, to calculate and execute the decisive move to actually harvest those rewards. All right, so this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually use it? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the practical application. You can think of these next few slides as your personal cheat sheet. This is your guide for knowing which mindset you should be in and when. So first, think about your objective and the context you're in. Wide thinking is your best bet when you need to cultivate potential, especially when the value is kind of fuzzy and unclear. Like when you're building a platform or an ecosystem.
Deep thinking, on the other hand, is your go-to when the value is countable and forced, when you need to win a very clear material exchange.
Now let's see how this plays out with initiative and flexibility. When you're in wide mode, you want global initiative to control the overall flow. You want to preserve your options. There's this great concept in Go called aji, which is like latent potential, and you delay those huge commitments. But in deep mode, you're all about local initiative to win a specific fight, and you commit your resources only when you are absolutely sure of the outcome.
But here's the thing, using only one of these modes is really dangerous. If you stay wide for too long, you risk what's called ambiguity drift. You just kind of float around, never committing, and you miss out on golden opportunities. But if you're always deep, you risk myopia, winning a small battle but completely losing sight of the war. This framework is all about helping you avoid both of those traps.
Okay, let's bring this all home. Now that you have the framework, how do you actually put it into action? What is your next move?
It really all comes back to this simple but incredibly powerful two-step cadence. First, you start wide. You scan the entire landscape, map out all the zones of influence, and you shape the possibilities. Then, and only then, you go deep. You execute with the precision and calculation of a chess grandmaster.
Because at the end of the day, the real strategic power doesn't come from picking one mindset over the other. It comes from being able to flow seamlessly between them, to be both panoramic and precise, to be both a visionary and a tactician.
And that leaves you with one simple question to take into your next big challenge. When you're faced with that complex decision, will you know whether to start wide or to go deep? Because choosing that right first step, well, that could change absolutely everything.